Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to get a jump start on some of my tropical bulbs, corms, tubers for the season, mainly dahlias. And I put up a video similar to this last year, and I had some other things in that video. I'll link it up here. This year I've got elephant ears, I've got some ranunculus, and some dahlias that I'm doing as part of this video. My average last frost date is April 15th. Maybe April 10th to April 21st, somewhere in there is usually my last frost. Sometimes it can be a little later, so I'll look at the, I'll typically be looking at the 10-day forecast around mid-April to decide whether I'm planting my tropical things outside. So my flower baskets, annuals that are going in the ground for the summer, my tomatoes, peppers, and then things like dahlias and elephant ears, tropical things. Here I am in the middle of March though, and I have these great dahlia tubers, and I'd actually like to just go ahead and get a little bit of growth on them before I put them in the ground in April. And I can get some new growth on the top of them, and I can get some new roots on them. And in my season for dahlias, which lasts from about the 1st of May or so until mid to late September, having them already started like that, they'll get blooming probably a month earlier doing it this way. Same thing with my, this elephant ear and some ranunculus that I'm doing, and I'll talk more about these when I get to that point. There's nothing to this. You have your dahlia tubers, which hopefully you got, you find some good ones. This is what they look like. When we're talking about a tuber, we're talking about a root that has some stored energy in it from the winter time. Typically, we consider dahlias hardy outside from about zone 7B to 10. They can be left in the ground through the winter. Those of you who are in colder areas, and I'm literally in the middle of where they'll come back or not come back, typically really established ones will come back for me. But the rest of you watching, if you want to keep your dahlia tubers, you have to lift them out of the ground. Same with the ranunculus, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You lift them out of the ground and store them through the winter. There's lots of videos on YouTube for doing that. I leave mine in the ground. Some come back, some don't, and I get to put in some new ones every year. Some I buy as tubers like this, and others I do from seed. And if you look at my seeding videos, you can see that. Pretty easy to tell where the new growth was last year on the top of one of these. And so the bottom part are these nodules. All I do on this is I put a little bit of, this is a trade gallon container or 3-quart container. Some people, they call this gallon, but it's not really. It's a 3-quart pot that you'd buy your shrubs in. I'll put a small amount of potting mix on the bottom. This potting mix was made here, and it's just compost and a little bit of pine bark mixed together. You can use whatever potting mix you want to. I like to use this bark mixed in it a little bit if you can find it, just because it drains pretty well, and your underground tubers, bulbs, corms, all those kinds of things rot easier than other things. So I take the dahlia top up after I put about 3 inches of soil down on the bottom of it. I put the tuber down in the container, and I leave where the growth was last year barely showing at the top after I put this soil back around it. This tuber was so large that it's actually deformed the container a bit, but I just pack this around. Okay, that's where that top growth was coming out of the ground last year, and that's all that I cover here. I'll just tamp that down a bit. I'll keep the soil moist, but not wet. It's moist right now, plenty moist. I don't need to do any watering on it. These will sit outside any day that it's over the nighttime temperatures are going to be over 45. They'll just be left. They'll be left outside. I'll put a tag on each of them. So this variety is called Tahiti Sunrise. So that tag is going into that container, because that's the most important thing. You will not remember which is which if you don't. But again, I'll show you that real quick. This is just a little bit, about 3 inches of this potting mix on the bottom. The tuber placed onto the top of that, and then soil packed in around it, and I'm just leaving exposed where the growth was last year. These are going to sit out in the full sun in my landscape. If the nighttime temperatures are going to be, let's say, under 40, I'll bring these in. So that won't be many nights left during the season that will be like that, but there'll be a couple nights I'll need to protect them. But getting them in this black container, one of the main reasons black containers are used in the nursery business is because they do heat up. And so having them out here in the sun, these will heat this tuber up, and it's going to think it's spring a couple weeks early, get the roots going. Top growth should come, again, protected 3 or 4 nights between now and then, but hopefully, you'll see in my videos, this thing will be about this tall probably when it goes in the ground around April 15th to April 30th, somewhere in there. Next up is an elephant ear, and this is technically a corm, but it's very bulb-like. Everything the plant needs is stored in the bottom of that. Sometimes it can be confusing about what's the top or the bottom of one of these. The bottom tends to look a little bit more ragged, where you can see where roots initiated from the bottom of it, and the top has these circles that get smaller and smaller and smaller where the new growth came up last year. These are almost hardy. This is another one. I'm in zone 7B on the edge of zone 8, and where I'm at, some years they come back and some years they don't. I've left 2 in the ground, and I just don't know. A lot of it's based on how wet the winter is and how cold the winter is. Once we get one established here, and it has a couple years under it, they've come back pretty reliably. So, but I bought this really nice one. Make sure they're firm, when you purchase them. Really easy to grow. Again, this is a tropical though, so if I put it in the ground now, it's almost certainly going to have a problem. Or if it had new growth on it, and we got a frost or a freeze, you wouldn't want it outside. So it's going to go in a container. I'm going to get this growth, which is actually already started on it. I'm going to get that going, and I'll protect it a few nights between now and the end of April, and then it'll go in the ground in the landscape or potentially in a container. I don't know. I've got a full 1-gallon container for this, and I'm going to put, again, 1 inch or 2 of soil on the bottom of it, just like that. I'm going to set this corm in there again with the circular part. It's got new growth all over it. This thing is absolutely about to explode, but again, I'll have to protect it. It was inside a store, and the store was quite warm. I'm barely going to cover it in this container. I'll plant it slightly deeper when it goes into the landscape. I'll usually put at least a couple inches of soil over top of them, and then a little bit of mulch in my landscape. But here, I'm just barely going to cover it just because of the size of this container. All I'm trying to do is establish roots down here at the bottom and establish a little bit of new growth up on top, and then I'll decide where it's going for the spring, but I'll have a jump start on it at that point. So easy peasy, elephant ear. Last up on my jump start video for this year are some ranunculus. These aren't the best ones I've ever purchased, but they were the best I could find. If you're going to plant ranunculus directly in the ground, you can soak these for a couple of hours before you do. These are hardy in zone 8 to 10, and so if you live in zone 8, 9, or 10, you put these in the ground typically in the fall. They can be done in the early spring, but typically in the fall, and they'll actually establish themselves through the winter and then put on a big show. And down in the deeper south like that, I would call them almost cool season perennials. They jump up early and get started blooming before a lot of other things do. And then, they're done for the season, but they're perfect flowers. I mean, just perfect flowers. If you've never grown these, I highly recommend them. And again, they'll come back year after year in zone 8 to 10, but we can grow them anywhere. They can be grown from zones 3 to 10. If you're growing them in colder areas, then you plant them in the late winter, early spring after your average last frost date. So again, I'm just going to jump start them in these containers. I said they'd probably be soaked a couple hours if they were going directly in the ground. I don't really need to do that, jump starting them in a container like this. I'll move these in and out just like the elephant ear, just like the dahlias if I need to, if it's going to be below maybe 40, 45 degrees at night. I'll decide to protect them some. I'm going to plant them a little closer together than you would. I think you'd plant them, if I was planting them in the deep south someplace and I knew they were going to come back every year, I'd probably put them about 4 inches apart, maybe 2 or 3 inches down. In this container, I'm going to put about 5 in the container, and I don't know if they're coming back or not. I'm still going to put them down a couple inches, and this is a spidery looking corm. The spidery part goes down, so they're easy to hold themselves in place. I'm going to put about 5 per container. I'm going to assume they're not going to come back year to year, but if I have a mild winter next year, they will. So that's it. There's 5 of them in that container, spider part down. couple inches of soil over the top of them, and just like that, those are Ranunculus will get going. I'll show you one more time. Just that much soil, and 5 of these placed spider parts down. Just like that. These make one of the best cut flowers. They're super long lasting as well. But there you go. If you look back at last year's video, you can see some liatris and some other things I got started early as well. Right here on these dahlias, the stem is sticking up just above the top of the soil. The ranunculus is completely covered. Elephant ears are completely covered. So they'll sit out here in the sunlight, and hopefully I won't have to protect them anytime between now and mid-April, and I'll have lots of new growth on them. That's unlikely. I'll probably have to put them inside at least a couple nights between now and then they'll go in the ground. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can follow along with how they turn out this summer. Thanks for watching.